How's it going, history buffs? So today we're going to talk about Christianity and how much Christians should be like Romans. After Christianity became an important part of the Roman Empire, there was an important debate about how Christians should act as members of the elite. The debate centered around how ascetic Christians should be, whether they should marry, whether their priests should marry, how they should behave as members of society, how much they should participate in the government, how much they should drink, how much they should have sex. And the debate carried on for centuries, and it affected a lot of aspects of Christian life. For example, if you read 1 Timothy or Titus, you'll notice that bishops and priests are encouraged to marry. In fact, the person who wrote those letters, who, by the way, wasn't Paul, argues that they need to be married in order to appreciate how to be a member of society. But as we go later in history, particularly in the 300s and the 400s, it becomes imperative that priests and bishops shouldn't marry. They should be examples of Christian celibacy for their communities. So how exactly did that change get made? Well, it starts with the debate in the 2nd century about how Christians should integrate with Roman society. But it really comes to a head after Constantine made Christianity an acceptable religion in the Roman Empire. And in fact, Constantine gave Christians a way to be full-fledged, powerful members of the Roman government. He gave Christian leaders, like bishops, auctoritas. And there was a huge backlash against this because Christianity grew up as a religion of protest in a lot of ways, against wealth inequality, against social inequalities, for the changing of the world and the transformation of the world into the kingdom of heaven. So when they became part of the upper echelon of the world, there was a huge culture shock. And through it emerged monasticism, through the figure of St. Anthony. St. Anthony died around 350 CE, so he lived right in this generation of Constantine, and he became a symbol of Christian protest against the world and the desire and even the advantages of leaving civilization to live alone with God. Anthony lived in Egypt. He was dissatisfied with his community, so he left and fled to the desert, which you'll recall in Egypt, if you go 20 feet away from the Nile, you might as well be in the desert. So Anthony lived on his own in the desert as what we call an ascetic. He fasted and prayed most of his time, but he became really popular and people started gathering around him and forming a community. And these would be the first monks. Monks are people who live alone together. That's where the name literally comes from. It's a Greek term meaning alone together. And they found communities that are supposed to be separated from the world for them to pray and fast. Anthony reacted by going even further away from his monastery, and he died living alone in a cave up on a cliff. It's quite an interesting sight, actually. So what Anthony and his monastic community show is this protest against the mainstreaming of Christianity. And the protest gets adopted in all sorts of areas. For example, we see a lot of women refusing to be married at this time. We see that move, like I mentioned earlier, towards celibate priesthood. And we see, most importantly and most significantly, this growth of monastic communities. And these monastic communities, over time, will become important economic centers and economic developers in the Middle Ages. So one of the most important economic and spiritual movements in Christianity actually starts as a protest against the success of Christianity. So as you're reading the materials for this week about the start and rise of Christianity, consider the effect that it had on the way Christians interacted with the world around them, and I'll see you in discussion.